Hello, everybody. I'm back with Dr. Adi, and we are going to talk about perfectionism. We're going to be finishing off our series on it by talking about what to do with it from the internal perspective. So, in our last one, we covered how to externally figure it out, right? And find ways to overcome your patterns behaviorally. Now, we're going to talk about how to shift your perspective and change your personality so over time, this becomes integrated into who you are and truly, truly get over being a perfectionist. So we're going to talk about three things. We're talking about mindfulness of judgments. We're talking about how to reframe shame, and we're going to talk about how to recognize growth opportunities. So Adi, you want to kick us off with mindfulness? Is that's your deal? A
Sure.
mindful expert.
Yes, I do love mindfulness. I want to say that I myself had a lot of judgments toward mindfulness before I started doing it myself, maybe because of the sarcasm that's inherent to my Israeli culture and kind of a rejection of anything that has a whiff of new age. And so imagine my surprise and dismay when it actually changed my life and made things a lot better for me with my own challenges in terms of anxiety and judgment. Um, we all judge all the time. We enjoy judging. It helps us. It makes us, it's kind of like a shortcut of what's bad, what's good, what's worthy, unworthy. Should be this way, shouldn't be this way. It makes it a little bit more organized and easy to approach new situations or something that's unknown. There is a price, though, to the judgments. When we judge, when we come with a judgment, a criticism, a blame, all sort of versions of judgment, we then color our perception with a particular lens. Typically a negative one. There are positive judgments. They're typically not as damaging to us, ourselves, and our relationship with others in the world as the negative ones, though they have their own inherent tracks as well. I'm going to focus on the negative for today. Um, we want to be mindful of judgments because we want to make sure that we treat them as such, as products of the mind, ideas or assumptions that come up, not necessarily the reality of what's going on. And how is that related to perfectionism? Many times when we have a perfectionist composition of, say, a part of our personality or our approach to doing things, we have judgments about what is good and what is bad, what is worthy and not worthy. And usually those are extreme judgments. We think with black and white kind of thinking, all or nothing. Either this is all the way exactly how I wanted, 100% in my control, 100% the product that I wanted to produce, or it is nothing, garbage, shitty, nothing that I want my name on. And that really doesn't leave us with a lot of space for growth and for understanding how to maybe create something out of the reality of what is, rather than our imagination of what should be. So judgments often come as thoughts that are coming up for us in the mind. Thoughts like, oh no, I don't like this. Why did this happen? Why me? It shouldn't be this way. Shouldn't really are a clue for you. And all sort of shortcuts such as stupid, lazy, useless, worthless. Being mindful of that is creating a little bit of space, a little bit of room between me, Adi, the person who is striving for something or have a goal, and the thoughts that are coming up as I'm doing it. The idea is not necessarily to change the thought, just to acknowledge that they're there. There could also be sensations and urges related that I might benefit from being mindful of. And when I say mindful, I mean pay attention. Notice that it's there right now. That thoughts, or maybe a facial, maybe I'm making a face, maybe I'm like, I'm making a judgmental facial expression, or I feel the judgment coming up physically. There might be a sensation of like heart pounding or clutching of the heart or the chest area, nausea, headaches, feeling a little fuzzy or dizzy. All of that can clue you in that you want to reject something. You want to push it away. The judgment creates kind of like, this is not me. Let me just label this and make this far away from me. So noticing all that. So mindfulness means paying attention to the fact that it's happening now, non-judgmentally. So we don't want to judge the judging. We don't want to label anything good or bad. We want to acknowledge that this is what's happening and then take action that is valued action. What do I value? What's important to me? What do I want out of this? And we talked last week about creating reasonable and accomplished goals for ourselves, small goals. If I did that, noticing that a thought came and an urge came, maybe an urge to not do it now, to postpone, to check a million things. Like when I read an article, if there's a name or something, a topic, a phrase that I'm not familiar in, I have an urge to go to Wikipedia and check it. That's my perfectionism. I cannot read a article in psychology without knowing everybody and everything in it. That urge to be perfect, to know everything, actually deters me from reading the article effectively, from focusing. So if the thought, oh no, I don't know this, I must be stupid, this must be important, I don't know enough. If I believe that thought, if I am merged with that thought, I might follow the urge. If I'm mindful that the thought came and I'm like, oh, a thought came, let me read my article, not changing it, not asking myself, is this thought rational or not? Should I do it or not? Moving away from engaging with the thought to acknowledging that it's there, not judging it, not engaging with it, and continuing the valued action that I chose. My value is to be the most knowledgeable psychologist that I can be. It's a value for me, it's important. And reading the article will get me there. I should not confuse it. I will be more effective if I didn't confuse it with, I want to know everything about psychology, because that's not possible. It's not going to happen. It is a field that's been here for more than 100 years, and I'm just in my 40s. I only learned to read less than 40 years ago. So that's not going to happen for me. So that's being mindful of what's going on. What does the body say to me? What thoughts is the mind kind of producing? And what urges that bring up? And when we are mindful, again, we don't have to engage. We don't have to change anything. We just know that it's happening now. And we're meeting it with a bit of a smile, with friendliness, with non-judgment. Whatever it is, even if judgments are present, we're not judging the judging. So that we can make a valued choice about what actions we want to take. If you have anything to add, Mark, go right ahead. If not, you can take us toward reframing shame and guilt.
Yeah, I just think, putting that little mindful space in between your thought and your action or acting out is one of the major keys to mental health, I've found, right? It gives us a little bit of choice, a little bit of control, a little bit of power in what we want to do. And it lets us, instead of compulsively being driven to do something, we can now be like, okay, it's happening. Now what do I want to do about it? And we might still judge ourselves, right? You might still do the thing that you're going to do, but at least there's that little moment of awareness. It's like a little chip in the armor that can over time start to erode some of these patterns. What I also want to say about judgments is, many of the high performers that I work with use judgments as a way to motivate themselves, saying, hey, get better, be the best, you suck, you're lazy. And what I tell them, it's like you have a horse and all you're doing is hitting it with the switch. And instead of getting a racehorse, at the end of the day, you just get a beaten up horse. It doesn't actually work. But we've learned, and actually many people are successful running this way. It's kind of like running on fossil fuels or even like kerosene rather than running on a renewable energy source. Over time, it pollutes the system. Over time, it creates misery. Over time, it bleeds into our relationships. It's very, very toxic. And a key component of that is shame, which is what I'm going to talk about right now. Because the judgments, especially for those of us that lived in a shaming household, they generate the feeling of shame, which Adi, you did a wonderful job of talking about, right? It can feel like a headache, it can feel like nausea, it can feel like wanting to curl up in a ball, it can feel like being disgusted with yourself. It can, for many people, there's intrusive thoughts where when they feel shame, all their past mistakes run through their mind. And what makes shame particularly toxic is that the belief of shame is, I am a bad person, wholly. Right? Every part of me is bad, rotten, undesirable, unlovable. I'm going to be betrayed, abandoned, whatever our story is, right? It all comes online when we are in that shame place. Rather than, which I do think is appropriate, feelings such as guilt or regret. I think guilt and regret are completely appropriate. Sometimes we do bad things. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we should have went left when we went right, Those are good things to have and good things to talk about, process through, grieve through, feel through. But when it becomes personal, when one thing that you may be guilty of changes your entire place as a person, that's when it starts to become quite toxic. So the idea of reframing shame would be trying to use a little bit of willpower, or ideally a therapist or another person, confidant, that can say, hey, yes, you made a mistake. You didn't deliver on time. You missed that email. But it doesn't mean you're a bad person, right? You're still lovable. You're still acceptable. You're still good at your job. And then, I came from 12 step. I think there's a big piece that gets missed in some psychology literature, which is the idea of making amends, right? The idea is not to just give yourself a carte blanche with shame and be like, hey, you're fine, everything's great, you're lovable, and just continue to make mistakes and just spiral out. But to be like, okay, we made the mistake. How do I make amends to this person? How do I, get the work done? How do I communicate more effectively? How do I, apologize to my teammate from a place of sincerity? What needs to get done in order to mitigate this mistake that happened, rather than it being a shame response, which again is pretty self-centered, wholly turned on the self, and ultimately toxic. The last thing I'm going to add is, if you don't know in touch with your emotions, I work with men. Many men are not. We often struggle identifying shame. For us, it can come up behaviorally, where it can look like increased substance use. It can look like sleeping too much. It can look like, isolating and pushing people away. So if you can't quite hit that emotion yet, try to notice if your behaviors are changing. Shame often creates a cycle where, we feel shame, then we drink too much, then we're ashamed about how much we're drinking, and then we don't, text our girlfriend back, and then we're ashamed about that, and just creates this really awful spiral. Adi, have you seen any shame spirals in your work? What does that look like from your end?
Yeah, so much. I have so many thoughts as you talk, as usual. We can talk about these things for hours. I think shame, Brené Brown says that shame has, or rather, she says blame. What I think about blame and shame is connected to each other, because either I'm blaming myself or someone else. By that, shaming someone else or shaming myself for the fact that a mistake had happened or something isn't going my way. That has an invert relationship with accountability and repair. Why is that? Because shame is used to punish either the other person or me. And then everything is equal. A mistake was done, a punishment was given, all is balanced in the world. That doesn't mean that anything was fixed, that anything improved. We haven't learned anything. It just restores a little bit of balance. And when I see it at my work all the time, even in myself, say that I have made a mistake, I forgot something, or a therapy session went a certain way, and when I look back at it, I'm like, I missed the mark. I was misattuned to my patient. If I sit there and say to myself, shame on you, that wasn't good. You're not a good therapist. You're not doing a good job. You messed this up. This is not okay that you did that. How likely am I to go into the next therapy session with the resources and the full humanity that I need to use the body, the heart, and the mind to give the therapy that the next person needs? It's much more conducive to accountability to say, hey, why did this happen? What were the causes? Can I learn something from this? What would I like to do differently? Is this the kind of mistake that warrants an apology or an acknowledgement, or does it just warrant me paying more attention, being more mindful of it? What needs to happen for me to, again, live by my values, work by my values, have connections that are by my values? And so I see it happening so often for people. And especially, I think, when there is a behavior that somebody wants to change and there is a relapse, be that substance use, overly watching TV could be one of them, getting really unpleasant and aggressive, not necessarily physically, but even kind of like combative with loved ones. It could be all sort of things. And then a person comes to me with like lowered eyes, a deep sense of shame, self-hatred, because they had engaged in something that doesn't match with their values. They want to be a kind or sober or productive person, if we talk about perfectionism, and they haven't been. And that shame, typically, as you said, if shame is warranted, if you really did something that is violating others, if guilt and shame are warranted, you sitting there attacking yourself is not likely to create the repair between yourself and you and yourself and others. What can we do? What can we learn? maybe you're going to have to do a lot of mourning if something big was lost because of it. And the same goes in perfectionism in any domain of life. If you are shaming yourself for big or small mistakes, for anything that isn't going exactly as you plan, you're less likely to learn from it. And it's very, very important to seek opportunities to grow and learn rather than just stay with the mistake. In fact, the more that you're going to focus on the mistake as something horrible that happened, the more that it's going to stay with you. You'll remember it with shame. You'll engage with it with a sense of lack of control and despair. If you come to it with the approach of, okay, what can I learn? What went wrong? What's the growth opportunity here? Did anything here happen that that could inform me about how I operate, what something new I need to learn? Can I reframe this as something that is an avenue for me to actually excel? Because people who accomplish and get to the end of the goal are not necessarily perfect. They are able to bounce back from a mistake or a setback in a way that's productive and effective. They're able to be sustainable in their work. They don't need it to be perfect. If you always work toward perfection, you're most likely going to burn out, as we call it, quicker than somebody who's like, all right, maybe I made a mistake because I'm exhausted, because I've been working too hard and I need to self-care. What's needed in the system of my own individualism and my connection with the environment and other people who are maybe part of whatever project it is that's on the table to create growth now? Do I need to ask for help? Do I need some feedback from others? Do I need to internalize? For example, one of the most horrible cycles of shame is when somebody gives you feedback that isn't necessarily positive and you cannot hear it. It is either crushing for you and you feel devastated, or you become enraged and angry that anybody dared to criticize you, and you damage a relationship and respond to it in a defensive manner. If you are able to let go of the shame, and again, just be mindful that these thoughts and feelings are coming up and still respond with curiosity, then you might learn something really important. That's high varsity non-perfectionism. It's not easy to get criticism. I wonder if you have any further thoughts about reframing shame and self-attack as the deterrent to the progress rather than motivators, rather than justified in any way.
Hold on. There we go. And we're back. And the only thing that I would like to add is that many high performers, myself included, I'm trying to get better at this, make it look effortless. And I think that's something that's toxic in a lot of the culture, in a lot of the startup culture or a lot of the business culture, is that the people that are at the top, there's this air of like, oh, they're always, kicking ass, or they always know what they're doing, or they always have the right answer, they always show up, they never miss a meeting. There's this thing of making it look effortless. And I think it's because of the cultural factors that we've talked about in our previous episode of sharing those shame moments, sharing those growth opportunities, sharing those mistakes. It's not really accepted. It's really not accepted, and it's desperately needed, especially for new leaders, new professionals, people that are, striving for something greater, that are trying to make that jump in their career, in their life, in their family, in their relationship, whatever it is. I think the more that we can, share stories of failures and also, how we bounced back, the better off we can be. So we hope that, we can do some of that as we move into 2021 on this talk. We'd love to hear from you in the comments or, on YouTube, just to get this sense of starting to change the culture around normalizing mistakes, but also holding each other accountable for making things better. Because I think both are really important, right? Mm-hmm. So that we can all, raise up together, and that we can, have our best foot facing forward, and knowing that we're going to stumble a lot. I mean, I've made... we're at time here, but I've made so many mistakes that I cannot wait to share with you all that have been very embarrassing.
Same.
And a lot of them I've corrected in private, and I think that that's also a mistake. I wish I was more public with some of that. Yeah, Adi, you were going to say
right.
something.
I'm just agreeing with you, and I think it's really, really important, because We also want to be mindful of opportunities for pleasure and connection, laughing about it, being lighthearted, feeling that we have validated someone else by sharing what's going on for us for real can be a moment of connection. And just like we want to be mindful of urges to escape or urges to attack, defend, whatever it is, also really important to be mindful of opportunities for pleasure and joy, laughter, connection, learning, and discoveries in the process. And all of these are going to be forgotten if only a perfect end goal is a valid moment for celebration. So there's so many opportunities there. And Mark and I are definitely, at least with each other, allowing a lot of mistakes and a lot of mishaps, because this is kind of like a new adventure for us as well. And with that, I just want to kind of let our viewers know that we're going to take a hiatus until the new year. And so we'll miss you. And that's an opportunity to let us know, are there topics you want us to talk about? Is there anything that you find challenging at work or in your private life as well? We can always tie the professional to the personal because we are psychotherapists and that's our thing. We would love to hear from you in this time gap.
Yeah. Thanks for joining with us in the beginning of this journey, and we can't wait to see you next year. Take care, everybody. Bye.